One of the questions that I had over the years, for which I never got an answer up to recently, is that I was in the Vilna Ghetto with my family, whatever was left, my mother and my sister. And as I described earlier, we were on a fairly high floor in the ghetto, so I could see the rooftops, and I saw those gorgeous looking girls dressed as men with what it looked like machine gun Molotov cocktails, and every roof I looked at, I saw people just waiting to start a fight, which this fight was already predetermined, because there wasn't a chance that a small group of people, poorly armed, could ever not only win, but hold out for any length of time against the German army. But nevertheless, it was decided that there is no point in every couple of months losing maybe another son, another daughter, another father, another mother, and little by little they were going to kill us all, take us all to Panari. So we were all waiting for someone to fire the first shot. And then I went back to look at the roof, and I saw that the people have disappeared. And where did they go? What happened? This has been bothering me for years. Until recently, I was reading an article in Haaretz, a local newspaper, a prime newspaper here in Israel, and I came upon an article concerning this episode in my life. And what happened is that everybody was waiting for Abba Kovner to say, let's go. But the order never came. They waited and waited, and the order never came. So I have this article right here, and you people can read it for yourself, which is by Tam Segev from the Haaretz, and it says that the reason why the uprising in Vilna Ghetto didn't take place like it did in Warsaw, because Abba Kovner decided not to give the order to fight. From one side, it's a dark mark on Abba Kovner's leadership. From the other side, had he given the order to fight, I wouldn't be here giving testimony, because the chances of us surviving were zero. The few people that did survive, like Abba Kovner himself and the groups, they went through the sewer, and they had weapons with them, and they were mostly men or women in their 20s, had plenty of energy to go through the sewers, so forth and so on. So this is one mystery that was solved, as far as I'm concerned. And since Abba Kovner was, during the Partisans, was intertwined with my life during the war, I have a picture of what he looked like during the Partisans, and this was given to me by his wife when I went to visit her. In 1992, a book was published. It's an anthology on the armed Jewish resistance from 1939 to 1945. And if you turn to page 382 and 383, you'll find an article on my mother. If you look to your right, there's a picture of my mother, Dinah Mishkan Kustin, and on the bottom there's a picture of my sister, Helen Jagendorf, that's her married name, Kustin, and she appears there with Abba Kovner. With me, Judaism is a way of life. I like to see on a Friday night to see someone light the candles and say the prayer and eat the challah and say the brachot, because with me it's something that I remember my mother used to do, and that's a tradition. After the Holocaust, what I went through, what my people went through, I do not believe in God. If there is a God or was a God, if he could allow those kind of things to happen to his people. 6 million of us. Of them, 1.5 million children. What kind of God would stand by and let those things happen without him intervening? If he is powerless, if he cannot do anything about it, then he's just like the rest of us. Why should I worship him? The people that should really believe in God and really pray a couple times a day are the Germans, the Lithuanians, the Polish people, the Ukrainian people. They should really pray to God. At least 3 times a day, because they went ahead and killed 6 million of us for no reason, only because we were Jews. And they took our property, they took our houses, they took our belongings, and they didn't get punished. We have a house in Poland that belonged to my father and his doctor brother Nahum. If I remember correctly, it's not far from an airport. It's in Praga, in Poland. When we checked with the government, it said this is our house. They say it was taken over by the government. It belongs to the government, and that's it. Told them I have a Polish passport. He said it doesn't make any difference. All the property, all the Jewish property belongs to the government, and that's it. Not only didn't they get punished, they live a wonderful life. They took over all the factories that belong to the Jews. As far as being punished for the crimes, for the murders, none of them went to trial. Only a few of them. Nuremberg trials was a joke. They gave them lawyers. Some of them got over very light sentences because of technicalities. They got lawyers. We Jews didn't have any lawyers. We didn't have anybody to defend us. The biggest criminals, the ones that accomplished their duty, which was to kill as many Jews as they could, at the Nuremberg trial they got some of the best lawyers to defend them. And one guy, 3 of them got off free, some of them got were sent to jail, then they were let out. Some of them committed suicide. How did Goering get the cyanide? It's also a question. They were supposed to search everybody. The Russian general had the right idea. He says, what kind of trial? Let's line them all up against the wall and shoot those bastards. And the same thing with the Ukrainian and the Poles and the Lithuanians, and I can go on and on and on. Those are the people that should believe in God, because if you kill 5 people, 10 people, you go to jail or they'll execute you. But if you kill 1.5 million or 6 million, then a couple of hundred people go to jail. The rest of them manage to go to Venezuela, Argentina, go to the Vatican and get some false papers. And they should believe in God. Look, they went ahead, took over the Jewish property. They have a flourishing economy. People are dealing with them just like any other nation. Let bygones be bygones. Nobody cares. Do you think for 1 minute that in 1941, 1942, that Roosevelt and Stalin and Churchill and all the rest of the people in authority didn't know that what's being done to the Jews? They knew it. It's documented. They knew it. You had some dissidents, there were not many, but some of them. There were some Poles that came to Washington and wrote letters and affidavits saying what's happening to the Jews. What? They couldn't have bombed the tracks? They had planes over Germany anyhow. They couldn't threaten them that the Berlin or Frankfurt is going to look like Dresden if they don't stop gassing the Jews. But Jewish blood has always been cheap. And nobody did anything. Because in this world, you have to fight and you have to be strong. And you notice I say Germans, I don't say Nazis. This thing about Nazis is just so much bull. All Nazis were Germans. And the only reason why they make or try to make a distinction is because they lost the war. Had they won the war, every German would have wanted to say that he was a Nazi, that he was part of the government, part of the butchery. But now that they, thank God, they lost the war, they say, well, look, it was the Nazis that did it. The Germans were ecstatic about their new leader. They fought to get only a glimpse of him, forget about touching him. They gave their lives to go to the front and fight for him and die for him. So anybody that tells you, oh, the Nazis, that's all bunch of bull. The Germans were united and they volunteered for the army. The biggest pride that a mother could have is their son is in the SS. What a kavod, what a honor. Tell it to the neighbors, and sometimes they would post in the apartment on the front door that their son Wilhelm, whatever his name is, was right now SS officer. So a lot of people just don't know, and an awful lot of people just don't care. Well, they have a Mercedes, it's a nice car, I have the money, I'll buy it. Even though their grandfather and their grandmother were butchered by the Germans, but the grandchildren are riding in Mercedes if they have the money to afford it. And it pains me because my children, when I went ahead and picked up something in a store and I was going to pay for it, I was going to the register, the cash register, my son says, look, it's made in Germany. And naturally I put it back. I felt very good about it. recently I watched a discussion on, which was taken from German television, where some of the people were complaining about the money that are given to the Jews who went through the Holocaust, and it's going on for years, and they say the Jews are just getting rich out of it, and there were all kind of opinions, but most of them were against giving any money for to help out the survivors. Now, I hope that maybe what I'm telling you now, or the papers that I have, which I will show you, will help someone maybe 50 or 75 years from now doing research, because the facts are quite different. You know, if you watched my biography from the beginning, then you know my story. And recently, by recently, I mean on July 17, 2012, I got a letter from Germany, and I've put in a claim simply that I was told to put in a claim. Someone called me up from the agency, and they know that I'm a Holocaust survivor. And they asked me if I'm getting anything from Germany. I said nothing. And I don't want anything from them, because what they've done to me, to my family, to my people, can never be repaid. But they said, look, I understand how you feel, but you getting on in age, and you're going to have all kind of medical expenses, and at the age of 80, you know, those things, a lot of things happen, so you go ahead and put on a couple of notes of where you've been, what you've done during the war, and we'll put a claim in for you. So they went ahead and put in a claim for me. I signed it, and I forgot about it. Couple months later, or maybe it was a longer time than that, it was on July 17th, as I said, in 2012, I got this letter, and they say they checked my story and so forth and so on, and I'm entitled to compensation for what's been done to me and to my family, and they will pay me 300. They pay me 300 euros per month, mind you. This is what I'm getting. 300 euros per a month. So this, I want you to know, is a game that, a very sad game that they're playing with the Holocaust survivors, because they're just delaying things, delaying. Look, when I'm getting the compensation, when most of my friends who survived the war are already dead. I'm 81, I'll be soon 82, so how much longer do you think they have to pay? I'm not going to live to 100. So the Germans, they might have been evil and cruel, but they're not stupid. So they delay till most of the Holocaust survivors are dead. Like for instance, right now they decided to pay me 300 euros per month, and they get publicity for it, and we get very little because most of the people that needed it years before they got sick, and there are very few Holocaust survivors left right now. So I just want you to this is an original letter, so I want you to read it, and you'll see that this is what the talk in Germany is against compensating the Holocaust survivors. Believe me, I'm not getting rich from 300 euros per month. When I'm doing this recording, I was holding off with that because it was very painful to me. My children asked me for a long time, why don't you go ahead and tell your life story? I said, look, I don't want to open up the wounds again. I say I even didn't discuss it, the Shoah, the Holocaust with my mother, because it was so painful. But they say, look, you're getting older. We would like to have something, where we can show it to our children. And I went ahead and started telling my story the way I'm doing right now. And it was so painful that I would couldn't sleep at night. As a matter of fact, last night I had a dream that I was on the railroad station, and I was saying goodbye to millions of people next to the trains, children, men, women, people as far as I can see. And they were lining up to say goodbye to me, to give me a hug, and seemed no end. They were coming and coming and coming, and finally I woke up and I sat on the edge of the bed, and my wife says to me, what's the matter? You were tossing and turning all night. What's the matter? You cannot sleep? I said, I'm okay, I just had a bad dream. And I went and started calculating, because of the dream, how long it would take me to say goodbye to the 6 million innocent people, innocent Jews that the German destroyed, murdered. And I figured to say goodbye, I would say, what's your name? Who are you? How old are you? And say to them, good luck, would approximately take a minute or something like that. To say goodbye to 6 million people, shaking their hands and asking a couple of questions, your name, your age, where you're from. It would take a person more than 10 years. Imagine that. It will take more than 10 years sitting and shaking hands and saying goodbye to those people. The 6 million, is being tossed around. 6 million, it takes more than 10 years of shaking hands without stopping. For 1.5 million children to say goodbye to 1.5 million children, it will take 2.5 years without stopping. 2.5 years. Maybe whoever is watching it, don't just toss out 6 million or 1.5 million children too lightly, because the numbers are staggering. It would take 2.5 years just to shake hands and ask their name. Think about it. Think about it. What the Germans have done to us. Normally, or people that didn't go through the Holocaust, but when there is an anniversary of someone's death, maybe a father, a mother, a grandmother, a grandfather, they take the family, they buy some flowers, they go to the cemetery, they'll clean up the tombstone, they'll see that the grass is nicely cut next to the graves, and they'll put some flowers on the grave. Some of them might even say a prayer. For me, as a Holocaust survivor, there is no grave. I have nothing, absolutely nothing. My family has been either gassed and then burned, or they've been shot and put into a mass grave in Panar or someplace else, or in one of the concentration camps. The Germans made use of everything. They had tons of women's hair that were packed and shipped to mattress factories. The filling of the people's teeth before they burned them were taken out and remelted, and the gold has been made into bullions and sold in Switzerland. And I could go on and on and on. Someone devised a technique to grind the human bones into a powder and then use it as a fertilizer enhancer on the fields. I know it happened in Poland, must have happened in many other places. As a result, since we don't have a grave to go to, on the Yom HaShoah, or which is the Holocaust Remembrance Day, I take my family to the Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Museum right here in Jerusalem. And at 1 o'clock, there is a prayer for the dead. And I and my children go there every year, and we pray, and we say Iskar for our dead. As you'll see on the pictures that I have at the end, we also have 6 candles that we light for the 6 million of our brothers and sisters. And then there is certain mementos, like the money that was used by the Germans to give us the impression, in the Lord's Ghetto, to give them the impression of some permanence there, that there'll be some kind of a economy, that there will be money, ghetto money, and they'll be able to live a semi-normal life. The money was only to deceive them. The money had no value. So that we use that, plus I have some other mementos that I brought with me, and that's the way we spend our Yom HaShoah, which is the Holocaust Remembrance Day. Israel is central to the Jewish survival. We have to keep Israel strong and all times. It's 1946. I'm about 13 years old. We're in Lodz, and we got our Polish passport. And now we can start making plans to go to the United States. We have a layover of 1 month. Our plan is to try to get permission to stay legally in the United States and not to have to proceed to Cuba after a month. As you see on the following pages, there are all kind of stamps and more stamps, and the visa that we can go to Cuba. This was an application for non-immigrant visa. Here is a picture of myself and my mother. I was at that time about 13 years old. My mother was 47. This is the same application, except it's for my sister. I was together with my mother because I was a minor. My sister at that time must have been around 21, and she had to have her own application. In 1947, I was about 14 when we arrived to the United States. In those years, it's not like now where you have a poverty line. There are people above the poverty line and the people below the poverty line, and the below the poverty line, they get all kind of benefits. At that time, there was no such thing as poverty line. Myself, my mother, and my sister, we came into New York without any skills. The only thing you had at that time were organizations that we went to and stood in line, and I remember them. There was Hayas, and there was another place, UNRWA, and there was another place where we went joint distribution. So my sister got a job in Klein's department store. It was in Manhattan on 14th Street. This was the big department store, and she got a job in the gift wrapping department. And when she would come home, her hands were bleeding. They would be cut from the rope, from the strings, and from the paper. Paper, as you know, it could be very sharp sometimes if you don't know how to handle it. Well, in any case, I remember her hands were bleeding, and we would put iodine on it, and we put some cream on it. Myself, I got a job in a grocery store across the street. It was also on KustiN Avenue. It was right across the street from us. And what I would do, I would stay in a basement in total darkness, and I was kindling egg. Kindling eggs means that you have a bulb, and you take each egg and put it against the light to see if there is any blood clots over there in the egg. If there is any blood clots, you put it in aside, and then we would sell it to bakeries or whatever. If they're good, then someone else would go ahead and put those eggs in boxes, and they would sell it. And I would feel, after working for 6-7 hours, like someone coming out from a coal mine. I would have to get my eyes adjusted. But I was happy that I was able to get paid for it, and between myself, my sister, and my mother, we were able to pay for the apartment and also buy certain basic things that we needed. Because when we got the apartment, it was empty. Utensils, so forth and so on. My mother rented out 2 of the rooms. This apartment had about 7 rooms. It was like a railroad track, you know, straight on each side of the rooms. And a lot more than we needed, but that's what was available. But it turned out okay. And what happened is that my mother rented out 2 rooms to nurses that worked in the hospital nearby, and she would cook for them, wash and press their uniforms, and they would always, I remember she would always put it folded and pressed on the bed, and then she would take in clothes or uniforms from other nurses from the hospital, and she had a little laundry going there, and getting the money from the nurses for the rent, plus what I would bring in, my sister, and what she would make, we started to see that we're able to manage our own. My mother insisted that we start going to school. I was already going to school, which I mentioned before. Go to school and in the morning and work in the evening. My sister would started going to Brooklyn College at night, and she would work at the packaging department in Klein department store during the day. After a while, she switched over and went to school in the daytime on a regular basis because my mother was making enough money from renting and the little laundry that she had in the house. As a matter of fact, she hired someone to help her with the laundry because it was getting too much for her. And we were able to function, and we were looking to see maybe we could get someone to help me out, because I had trouble in high school. Didn't know how to read or write, didn't know the alphabet, didn't even know the months, completely illiterate, like someone that came out of the forest. And I did come out of the forest. I literally came out of the forest, nothing. So what do you do with it? Didn't even know the language, couldn't speak English. Spoke Polish and Yiddish and some German. So what do you do with a guy like that? If they put me according to my knowledge, I would have to go to the kindergarten. I would be the clown there. All the kids would make fun of me. Now, if I go to the proper level, I would be sitting there just taking up space, because I couldn't answer any question except my name and my age, because I knew nothing. Oh, I knew how to blow up a train. I knew how to assemble and disassemble a Russian machine gun, Pepper with my eyes closed. I knew how to assemble and disassemble a German Luger pistol with my eyes closed. But this wasn't in demand in the United States, in the school. You had to have some knowledge. So there was no money for a private teacher. So there was, in one school in New York, Thomas Jefferson High School, they had a special class for immigrant children. I got in there, and the immigrant children, they had a problem with the language, but most of them had a knowledge of basic math, maybe not at the level they should be, but they had some knowledge. I had nothing, but I mean nothing. Now, little by little, most of the people would graduate from this class and go into high school or to junior high. I remained there. I was in the special class. The teacher was Miss Hay. She was a wonderful teacher. She was trying to help me as much as she could, but I was so far behind that even her best effort there just wasn't enough. So it so happened that on our floor was a man, our neighbor, who was an invalid. He was in a wheelchair. I don't know what his problem was. I don't remember what it was. And it turns out that he used to be was an elderly man. He was a principal of a high school at one time. And when we once started talking, and I told him what kind of problems he has, says, look, you come over whenever you have time. He says, I got nothing to do. He used to be on the outside when there was a sunny day, sitting in his wheelchair. And he would tutor me for free. He didn't need the money, and we didn't have the money, so it worked out fine. And he would tutor me, and he really helped me a lot. Well, as I said before, I managed to finally finish high school and finish college. Up to this day, I feel that I have a gap. Ask me about geography, someone that finished college. I know nothing about geography. I've picked it up, I see a map here and there. I pick it up, but I know nothing. There are so many things that I'm still missing, but thank God I did okay. I lived in Manhattan. I lived at 201 East 66th Street, and this was 3rd Avenue, the corner building, 3rd Avenue and East 66th Street. My mother's apartment was on 50 Sutton Place South, so it was convenient for me to walk over to my mother, or for my mother to walk over to my apartment. But not only wasn't I happy living in Manhattan, but I had a guilt conscience. I felt really guilty that I sort of betrayed my best friends we were making plans. We were in lodge that we were going to go to Israel, and we're going to do this. And one guy was a very good swimmer, and he says he'll swim at the ocean and so forth and so on. And here I let him go to Israel, and I opted up for the good life, so to speak, and went with my mother and sister to the United States. Whenever I would come back to Israel, I would check to see if I can find out what happened to my friends, and every time they told me the chances are a very strong indication that they were almost straight when they got off the boat, being that they had experience. Some of them were had already training, military training, so they took him to Latrun, where most of them never had a chance to fulfill their dreams. So this was my personal problem, that I felt that my place is in Israel. This is the wedding picture of my parents. It was taken in 1923 in the town of Slonim, which was Belarus. I think it still is Belarus now, which means White Russia. I'll start off with the top row, going from left to right. The first man on the extreme left is my uncle, my father's brother. His name is Nahum, Dr. Nahum Kustin. He was a physician in Warsaw, Poland. He and my father owned a large apartment house in Poland. When we wrote to the Polish government to see if we can claim the house, they said that all the property, Jewish property, is now property of the government. So we can forget about that one. Right next to him in the white shirt is his wife, whose name I do not remember. I only know that she was also a physician. I think they met in college. Then there is my uncle, Itzik, from Slonim. He was an ordained rabbi, but he didn't practice it. Next to him is my aunt, Rochel. Then the man with the mustache is my uncle. I don't remember his name, nor do I remember the name of my aunt right next to him. On the extreme right, there is the aunt from Vilna that we talked about when we left Poland to go to Vilna. We stayed at her house. Then on the other line from left to right, that's my grandmother and my father's mother. Then my father, my mother, and my mother's mother, my grandmother. Then the man with the tall hat is a rabbi, my mother's brother, who was a rabbi in London. His son, Victor Mishkan, became a famous lawyer and also became a member of the British House of Lords. He was a friend of Abba Eban, and when Shimon Peres had to meet secretly the king of Jordan, King Hussein, they used Victor Mishkan's house as the meeting place, and he was quite. Now, on the bottom line, the children, most likely they're all my cousins, but who they are, I have no idea. Now, we had an extended family numbering, by my mother's count, about 200 that she could document. Out of all of them, myself, my sister Helen, and my mother are the only ones that remained alive. The Germans and their collaborator killed them all, murdered them all. Naturally, the man in the second row, my mother's brother, lived in London, and as a result, his life was spared. But otherwise, every one of them was murdered. I didn't know that this picture even existed till one day a cousin of mine brought it to me, and that's how I got the picture. This is a picture of myself. It was right after the war, so I must have been around 11. And This is the first clothes, normal clothes that I wore. I remember we went to a tailor and he made this jacket for me. Everything was handmade in those days. Hey, I finally graduated high school. Here you see I'm wearing a graduation robe, which I had to pay for, and a ring, which you don't see, which I had to pay for. And the smile is because I'm very happy that finally I'm finished with high school, and I must have been close to 18 by then. This picture, I must have been, let's see, but I was in college, so I must have been about 20 years old. This picture was taken about 1954, just after I graduated college, which, well, I must have been about 22. And immediately upon graduation, I got a notice to report to the induction center. There was a war going on. There was a Korean War going on. They needed my services in the army, and I was inducted in the army. I got my citizenship papers while I was in the service, and I spent, I think, about 2.5 years in the army. And I also learned the meaning of the word kike. I never heard the word kike before. I didn't know what it meant. I came from New York. One time in the morning, on roll call, on my first day, the lieutenant asked me, "How do you pronounce your name, Abraham? Kustin or KustiN?" And someone yelled out, "Just call him Kike for short." And people started laughing. I didn't know what kike meant. Later on, I found out that it was a derogatory term for a Jew. This picture was taken in 1972. It was taken in Monroe, North Carolina, Monroe. It's a town, about 22 miles from Charlotte, North Carolina. I am a plant manager in the Singer Company, and on my extreme left is my assistant. Then I'm sitting smoking a cigar. Then there is my quality control manager. Then there's the shop foreman, and the guy in the glasses, Dennis Haley, is the production manager, and we're having a meeting. I was the youngest plant manager, one of the youngest plant managers in the history of the Singer Company. This picture was taken by the Singer Company for their file. In August 16, 1964, I got married. I was about 31 years old at that time. We got married at the Hotel Pierre in Manhattan. My wife was very disappointed that we couldn't get married at the plaza, but there was a problem with the kashrut. They couldn't get glad kosher and so on and so on. So we got married in the Pierre, and here are some of the pictures. This picture shows starting from the top row, left to right, Dr. Benjamin Jagendorf, my sister's husband, my sister, Dr. Helen Jagendorf, a relative, Sam Mishkan, who was sort of standing in for my father, which I did not have, my wife, Ellen, myself, and my dear mother, Dinah. This picture was taken in the late 1960s or early 1970s. We're at my sister's summer home in Long Beach, New York, and on my left is my mother, Avi Kustin. I'm in the middle, and on my right is my sister, Helen Jagendorf Kustin. Jagendorf is her married name. Those are pictures of my second marriage to my gorgeous wife, Galina Kustin. It took place in Tel Aviv, and as you see, we're both smiling. This was one of my happiest days in my life because I love Galina very much, and even I was much older than she was. She agreed to marry me, and as I will show you later, we have a wonderful life together. I never make the same mistake twice. So the second time that I got married, I was careful and I was right. Now, it was also a very sad day in my life because when I came to the office of the Rabbanut to get my marriage certificate, I was told, after all that I told them, after all that I went through, that I had no proof that I was a Jew, and I was denied a marriage certificate because I had no papers after going through the Holocaust and hiding and burning everything that would indicate that I'm a Jew, except my circumcision, that I couldn't do anything about it. Here in the state of Israel, my dream, I went to the Rabbanut, and after talking to me and then calling in an rabbi, they decided that I do not qualify to be a Jew. Luckily for me, I had the possibility of getting a letter from New York from an Orthodox synagogue that I belong to in my neighborhood. And I wrote away for the letter to verify that I'm of the Jewish faith. But when I was in a Rabbanut, and which hurt me the most, I was called aside as I left the office by another person in rabbinic clothes, payas and all that. He might have been a rabbi, spoke perfect English. Somehow he knew that I was denied papers to marry as a Jew, and he told me quietly next to the window, if I bring $1,000 in cash, he emphasized, he'll take care of it for me. Evidently, he was tipped off by somebody on the inside. Not evidently, it's obvious that he was that I didn't qualify, and here I was a good target to get some bribe and money. Naturally, I left in disgust and came back a month later with a letter from the Park East Synagogue. And we got married, and I'm a very happy husband and father. And as we go on, I'll show you the wonderful family that we have raised together. Here we are, myself and my beautiful wife, Gali. We're in our apartment in Jerusalem. We lived in Tel Aviv, but Tel Aviv was getting more and more like a little New York. And neither I nor Gali wanted to live in New York. And here we came to Israel, and it reminds us of New York. So we decided to go to the place which we always dreamed of and live in Jerusalem. And here we are. We're very happy that we made the move to Jerusalem. Here, my wife, who has a master's degree in engineering, found employment, and I'm retired, so I received my Social Security, and together we're managing okay. Here you can see the whole family. We're on a vacation in Golan Heights. That's part of Israel, and it will remain part of Israel. And to start with is my son, our son Gilad. Here's my beautiful wife. Then there is my son Shai. And then here am I. And then there is my son David. And here is our son next to him, Ariel. And here is my gorgeous daughter, Talia. This is a picture, if I remember correctly, it's Friday, and everybody's dressed up for Friday night for Shabbat dinner. With me, as I told you before, I'm not religious, but Judaism for me is a way of life. We managed to have a very Jewish home. On Friday night, we light candles, we drink wine, we say the brachot, and we have the Parashat Shavua, and our children know the Bible. I'm amazed how well they know the Bible, and they're going to a religious school, even though after they get out of school, they take off the kippah or the yarmulke and put it in the pocket. But they are going to religious school and getting a good Jewish upbringing, and they teach us a lot of things, which I think speaks for itself. My daughter Talia first visit home from the army, and as you can see, everybody wants to be the soldier. My little ones are saluting also, and my wish is, and I pray to the God that I don't believe in, that I live long enough to see my youngest one in uniform, just like Tali and the rest of them, that will be soldiers shortly. This is a very happy occasion for us. Tali was promoted to lieutenant, and she was selected to a top intelligence unit, which I have no idea what she does. I only know where it is, and I know that we are very happy for her that she was one of the few selected to this secret intelligence unit. Our son, Shai, is 18 and is being inducted here in a top elite unit. And we're very proud that they accepted him, and he signed up for 4.5 years. That's the minimum for this special unit. And it's so secret that I have no idea what he does or where he is. And he wouldn't tell me, so I'm not asking. And that's as much as I know about it. Now, as you can see, my gorgeous daughter is next to me. She's a first lieutenant. And then you can see that I'm 6 feet tall. At least I used to be 6 feet tall. Before, with my age, I'm shrinking. Now, Shai is 18 and Ariel is 15 and a half. And look how they are towering over me. So they must be about 6 feet 3, 6 feet 5, something like that. Here is a picture of myself and my first lieutenant daughter Talia. Today is Yom HaZikaron Chayalim. This is the Remembrance Day for the fallen soldiers. And we had a siren and everything stood still in their honor. And pretty soon the cemetery, all the military cemeteries all over the country will be open. And we go and we visit their grave, say a prayer, or put some flowers on, because those are our heroes. And speaking about heroes, let me tell you just about one of them. His name is Major Roy Klein. He was 31 when he died. He was 100% responsible had an obligation, he felt, to watch out for his soldiers. Even some of the soldiers might have been older than he was. And when a grenade was thrown at them, Roy Klein, without hesitation, said, "Shema Israel," threw his on the grenade and absorbed all the shrapnels in his body, and all his soldiers came out of the experience alive. Those are the kind of soldiers we honor today. We all recognize his bravery. He is buried next to other soldiers at the Herzl Military Cemetery, but he never finished the prayer, and I'm going to finish it for him. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. I want everybody that's watching this to know that I'm such a proud Jew. I'm such a proud Israeli. I love this country. And I'm only sorry that I didn't come here sooner, but I couldn't. I couldn't because I had my mother. She was on in age. But this was our first destination right after liberation. We were ready to go to Israel, but circumstances have changed, and my mother was the one that decided to go to the States. But all is well that ends well, as they say. I'm a very, very proud Israeli. Am Israel Chai.